Hey guys, today I'll show you a horror thriller film named The Corpse Washer. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins in a local village where the men left for the city to work and never returned, leaving behind a population of widows and orphans. Over time, the gender ratio in the village became severely imbalanced. A glance at the streets revealed an absence of women. Yet, even after being abandoned, the women still adhered to a preference for males. Take the mortician Madame Siti, for instance. She believed her son could live as he pleased, but her daughter, Lela, was expected to obediently inherit the family business. One night, Madame Siti draped herself in white cloth and prayed devoutly to God. A sudden chill crept up behind her. Without turning around, she knew an unclean presence had entered her home. Suddenly, a hand landed on her shoulder, startling her. She turned around sharply, only to find it was her daughter, Lela. Though the fear still lingered in Madame Siti's heart, when she heard Lela express her reluctance to become a mortician and her desire to find other work, she did not oppose her as vehemently as usual. She simply said that being a mortician was the most sacred of callings, one not everyone could undertake. Only those with pure hearts could perceive the forewarning of death and discern its truth. Lela didn't understand her mother's words, but watched as her mother hastily gathered her tools and left to prepare a body for burial. As she pushed open the door, the village broadcast announced a death. Throughout her life, Madame Siti had always been able to sense death before it was reported. Tonight's deceased was Madame Ida, whose death was so terrifying that even the seasoned mortician was shaken. Upon returning home, Madame Siti fainted, and when she awoke, she could not stop crying. She struggled to her feet to burn the deceased's belongings, her entire demeanor shadowed and grim, as if she had merged with the dark night. Lela, curious about Madame Ida's cause of death, wanted to ask if her mother had something on her mind. However, Madame Siti merely gestured for silence. Lela let her mother rest and promised to guard the belongings until they turned to ash. Once her mother left, though, Lela secretly pocketed one item, a tattered old photograph. As Madame Siti passed the hallway, she glanced at a mirror. The reflection was undeniably her own, yet it was the image of her deceased self. Later, as she lay down to rest, the creak of the bed made her think Lela had joined her. But when she turned, no one was there. Unease washed over her, filling her with foreboding. When Lela finally entered, Madame Siti couldn't help but apologize, explaining that the role of a mortician had to be passed down, as some were chosen by God and certain fates were inevitable. Moved by her mother's words, Lela embraced her in understanding and reliance. As the night deepened, quiet breathing filled the room. A shadow slipped through a hole in the roof, transforming into ghostly hands that crept toward Madame Siti. By 4:40 a.m., Lela woke to find her mother already a bloodied corpse. While cleaning her mother's body, Lela cried until her eyes swelled like pandas. Faced with her mother's unseeing gaze, she was overwhelmed with sorrow. At her breaking point, her mother's hand gently clasped hers. In that moment, Madame Siti passed on her ability to sense death. It felt as if her mother guided her through the ritual of cleansing the body. Madame Siti had always said that morticians were the last to meet the deceased, and washing the body was a way to cleanse its lingering resentment and pain. No matter what they encountered, a mortician had to keep the deceased's secrets. Soon, Lela discovered the cause of her mother's death. Embedded deep in her mother's mouth was a tangled ball of barbed wire. In the days that followed, Lela, dazed, lay on her mother's blood-stained bedding. Concerned villagers visited with condolences and financial support, noticing the bloody sheets. Knowing they loved to gossip, Lela reluctantly washed the sheets, but as she scrubbed, she saw another ball of barbed wire. When she reached for it, it vanished. That night, the villagers gathered in the church for worship. To everyone's horror, the recently deceased Madame Ida and Madame Siti appeared. Lela spotted the ghostly figures in the crowd, alongside another familiar face. It's Madame Anna. It seems unbelievable since Madame Anna was still alive. Fixating on the ghost resembling Madame Anna, Lela was startled when it abruptly appeared before her, making her scream in a chicken voice. At home, Lela heard whispers from her mother's bedroom. Summoning her courage, she approached, only to find a figure draped in white cloth. When she reached out to grab it, there was nothing underneath. As she stepped back, searing pain shot through her foot. She had stepped on a barbed wire ball. Despite the pain, she pulled it free and, at the peak of her agony, saw her mother's spirit again. Her mother gestured for silence and disappeared. Meanwhile, Madame Anna encountered a ghost peering at her from her bedroom doorframe. Her son saw nothing. Brushing it off as an illusion, Madame Anna went back to her room, only for her wardrobe to creak open on its own. As she moved to close it, ghostly hands emerged, gripping her head. Her son heard the commotion but found the door slammed shut and unyielding. Soon, news of Madame Anna's death spread through the village. Suspecting foul play, the sheriff sought an autopsy, but Madame Anna's son refused, demanding Lela prepare the body instead. Hearing of Madame Anna's death, Lela, though she had sensed it, was too terrified to perform the rites. That night, the ghost of Madame Anna appeared, pleading with Lela to help her. Terrified but compelled, Lela began the cleansing ritual. As she examined the body, Madame Anna suddenly sat upright, clutching her stomach in agony. Lela lifted the shroud and was shocked to find a long barbed wire lodged in Madame Anna's abdomen. It wasn't until the wire was removed that the body finally lay flat. However, Anna's once closed eyes remained open no matter how hard Lela tried to shut them. In that tense moment, she grabbed Anna's wrist and pleaded for her help tearfully. Lela collapsed to the ground, too afraid to look up. When she finally dared to glance again, Anna's blood-red eyes had finally closed. After Madame Anna was successfully buried, Anna's son decided to leave the sorrowful town. He revealed to Lela that his mother had been calling out the name Nur before her death. He then produced a group photo and folded the edge to obscure one woman's face. Upon closer inspection, Lela noticed that the three mysteriously deceased individuals were all next to Nur in the photo. Strangely, both Madame Ida's and Madame Anna's roofs also had gaping holes. At this moment, the old spinster Terry quietly pulled Lela aside and whispered that all three victims had died from bleeding from 7 orifices, just like Madame Ida, the first to die. It seemed eerily like a curse. Late at night, Lela took a spade to the cemetery and exhumed Madame Ida's grave to see her death state firsthand. As she suspected, a long barbed wire was pulled from between her legs. Horrified, she was suddenly surrounded by countless corpses, causing her to flee in terror. That night, as she reflected on the photo and thought about Nur, who had died years ago, Lela realized only a lucky lady from the photo was still alive. She decided to ask her about Nur. The lucky lady spoke viciously about Nur, calling her a homewrecker who destroyed families. Suddenly, she clawed at her own face, tearing it apart. Startled, Lela froze, but when she regained her senses, everything seemed normal. The lucky lady stood unharmed, looking at her in confusion. Meanwhile, news spread across the village about Madame Ida's desecrated grave. Lela's brother confronted her upon noticing muddy footprints at home, accusing her of vandalizing the grave. Lela urged him to stay silent, explaining she was investigating their mother's murderer, a vengeful spirit named Nur, responsible for cursing and killing 3 people. Their argument attracted Terry, who spread the tale of the vengeful spirit, making it increasingly sinister. Soon, every woman in the village feared being cursed by Nur. When Lela confronted Terry about spreading rumors, Terry vehemently denied it, even yelling at her. The passing sheriff intervened, saying Nur had committed suicide in the long past and couldn't possibly turn into an evil spirit. The village had even raised money for Nur's daughter after her death. If that child were still alive, she would be about Lilas Age. After the sheriff left, Lela visited Terry again but found her lifeless on the sofa. Suddenly, Terry's bloodshot eyes snapped open. It's revealed that she was possessed by Nur. Crying, Nur recounted her grievances, lamenting how everyone had branded her a mistress and homewrecker. Lela coldly responded that Nur deserved her fate for her shameless actions. Nur, enraged, left Terry's body, and Lela returned home in silence, staring at the scattered belongings of the deceased. The brother pleaded with Lela to stop investigating, reminding her of their mother's advice to keep the dead's secrets. Even if she uncovered the truth, their mother wouldn't come back to life. Moved, Lela decided to let go. The siblings embraced and cried together. That night, Lela finally slept peacefully, only to dream of being strangled by ghostly hands, bleeding from every orifice. She woke, terrified by the vividness of the dream, wondering if the restless spirits were forcing her to continue investigating. Determined, she sneaked into Madame Ida's house and accidentally overturned a glass of water. Beneath a hollow tile, she found photos of people with barbed wire piercing their faces. Among them was an intact photo of Nur hugging her daughter with the words, "Forever love Mom," written on the back. The truth became clear that Nur's daughter had summoned her spirit for revenge. Lela, clutching the evidence, stormed into Terry's house, demanding answers. Terry, shrouded in white cloth, suddenly morphed into Lela's mother, who tearfully admitted hearing rumors about Nur seducing her husband. As Lela approached her, she realized multiple spirits inhabited Terry, all hurling accusations at Nur for ruining their families. Nur's face appeared before Lela, warning her not to interfere. Frightened, Lela fled for her shitty life. news broke that the lucky lady had been found dead at home. When Lela tried to remove the barbed wire from her corpse, it sat up with wire protruding from its mouth. Surrounded by 4 spirits, her mother silently urged her to remain quiet while the others begged for justice. The spirits tightened the barbed wire around Lela's neck until she nearly suffocated. The sheriff burst in, breaking the ghostly illusion. He informed Lela that the lucky lady's family had agreed to an autopsy. As villagers gathered, Lela accused a newcomer of being the culprit. The girl smirked and whispered to Lela that they deserved it and that she should not meddle. Lela realized the girl was Nur's daughter and her mother's killer. The village women, upon learning the truth, attacked the girl, replaying the violence Nur had endured years ago. Despite no evidence of Nur's wrongdoing, the rumors led to her brutal death. In a tragic turn, Lela's brother died trying to protect Lela during the chaos. The rain washed away the blood and cleansed Nur's resentment. Years later, as Lela encountered another cursed item among the dead, she wondered if she'd investigate again, or let the past remain buried. The story ends. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.